For their kings have had their day, and with them sin and sorrow will forever pass away. For the tribe of Judah's Lion now comes to hold the sway. Our King is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
Every one of us are well and happy. Every day we're still working away. And we feel, as Brother Russell has said, the Gentile times have ended, and their kings have had their day, so we know not what awaits us. May you, day by day, keep close to the Master, and his presence will so cheer you that nothing shall be able to dismay you. Edith Kessler, October 11th, 1914.
At the kingdom's birth in 1914, the Bible students were not exactly sure what was going to happen, but they knew it would be a pivotal year. For decades, they had been singing that the Gentile times were closing and that the kings had had their day. And they had been using every means available to focus attention on this monumental event. Newspapers had carried sermons to millions. Volunteer workers had distributed millions of free tracts. Colporteurs were zealously preaching. Pilgrims were busy organizing congregations. And the message was expanding globally. But with the end of the Gentile times approaching so quickly, how could so few Bible students reach an entire world? How could they quicken the pace?
It is unanimously resolved to use moving pictures in teaching Bible truths. The Lord sanctioned this in his use of word pictures, so this should not be neglected. The Watchtower, July 1st, 1913.
With that resolution, the Bible students were galvanized to present the photo drama of creation. But such a mammoth undertaking would not come without challenges.
Some of the young brothers learned to operate the projection machine by volunteering at the local theaters. Being too young, I used to sit in the booth with the brother. I can remember how exciting it was when a film caught fire, how the brother had to act quickly to put it out and proceed with the performance. Dwight Kenyon.
Oh, it was excellent. It was very amazing. You had individuals back in those days that were able to do that without modern instrument, and it's very impressive.
That's really what helped my father to come into the truth. They got to the meeting the next day after it was finished and eventually started studying, and within a few months they were baptized. And my mom told me that she was one of the usherettes when they put on the photodrama there in their town in Texas. But they had little pictures, postcard size, of the pictures that were used, the slides, and it was a joy to look at those from time to time when I was a kid.
9 million people saw the photodrama during its first year, a precious message they would not soon forget. And there was more to come.
From every part of the field has come the cry saying, "What more is there that we can do?" The result is a new magazine under the title, The Golden Age. Joseph F. Rutherford.
After that announcement, Brother Rutherford asked of everyone there, how many desire to do this work? 6,000 Bible students stood up as one. And over the next decade, the thousands who would participate in that harvest work would use many creative methods to reach more people faster. Among them was a book, The Harp of God.
People were encouraged to get the harp study course by mail. Then, when I went to the home of our service director, his wife and I ran speed races typing addresses on these cards. We sent out hundreds each week. Trudeau McKittrick.
Soon another technique would come to the fore, the radio station WBBR.
The studio for this new radio broadcasting station was located in the attic. The microphone that we used at the beginning was taken from an ordinary telephone. Finally, after some weeks of preparations, we were ready for the first broadcast. That occurred on Sunday evening, February 24th, 1924. The call letters were WBBR. These call letters our enemies said meant wicked buzzes by radio. It was my privilege to throw the power switch on for that first broadcast, and away we went, hoping for the best. Ralph Leffler.
The peoples of this earth are now numbered by the thousands of millions. Many of these
WBBR, in many respects, was a forerunner to the videos because we had Bible questions answered there, we had public meetings, we had book studies, we had news.
The first piece of equipment that someone got when they came into the truth was a really good radio so they could hear WBBR.
And that's, like I mentioned earlier, how my parents first heard the truth, was a radio discourse that a brother gave a talk on Where Are the Dead.
I had the privilege of times of giving talks on WBBR. A young minister speaks. I gave that once or twice.
I was encouraged to take part in one of their Bible study groups.
I was privileged to be on it. It was a program that was designed as a family Bible study. But even before that, quite a number of years ago, Fred Franz was on WBBR. Imagine him on the air and youngsters listening to him. Good evening, boys and girls. I know it's drawing close to bedtime for many of you, but before you take yourselves to bed, I want to tell you a story.
I had never imagined I'd ever be on a radio program of any kind, and here I was presenting the truth as a part of a program. So it was a real joy to be on WBBR.
The success of WBBR was met with increased opposition, so other methods were used to keep spreading the kingdom message.
When I was little, we never had an automobile in our home, but these sound cars, big, beautiful cars, but these big horns on top. And when they broadcasted first music, everybody came out to listen.
And every weekend, some of the, what we would call today elders, would bring the sound car in and station it in our yard. And from there, they would play the records for the neighborhood. Every weekend, we had a large group of people listening because of the location. They could stay and listen. And there was quite a gathering during that time.
Another time, I sat up and started one of Brother Rutherford's lectures telling about the second coming of Christ. A few days afterward, a person told me that his fellow moonshiner was set up in the woods making a run of moonshine, when all of a sudden here came a voice from above. He got excited and went to running, but he could not get away from the sound. He finally ran home to get his axe and went back up there and chopped up his stick. He said he did not want the Lord to catch him making moonshine at his coming. C.M. Percival.
We would come up on a porch, open our case, set the arm in position on the record, and push the doorbell. When the householder opened the door, we would say, "I have an important message I would like you to hear." And we would start the record.
It is often said that
C.J.
religion
Woodward.
is a snare and a racket. And why?
When I was pioneering, I used the phonograph all the time. I liked the phonograph.
This is an upright phonograph. We had the type that opened up, and you could balance it on your hip if you were strong enough, or you'd set it down on the porch, and the message would be heard way down the street.
And I always enjoyed hearing, when I put the record on, Brother Rutherford saying, religion is a snare and a racket. And I'd look at the expression on the face of the people, whether they were happy or not.
And I remember they told us now to help the householder concentrate on the message, it would be good if you would watch the record. So we were told to watch the record go around and around and around. Of course, we would get a little bit dizzy.
Many times you'd knock on the door and set it up. What they call it, the doorstep setup. The party didn't even know what was going on. You started playing the record.
The only thing is, with a phonograph, you always had to make sure you had the right record on. Sometimes you would use that phonograph at home and you'd play some hillbilly records on it.
I took Mom's phonograph and I put on my Fats Waller playing Boogie Woogie and the St. Louis Blues, I remember.
And so if you got out in service and you happened to have a record that was still on there.
So she goes out in the service with the phonograph, lifts up the lid, I have an important message, and here's Fats Waller playing Boogie Woogie.
Some witnesses even nicknamed the phonograph Aaron because it did the talking for us. But that wasn't the only method that was used.
We also used a testimony card.
This little card would have a nice little presentation on it, with scripture or two, and you'd show that to the householder.
And usually they'd only read a few lines, and then they'd hand it back to you, so you'd have to finish the conversation.
You'd give it to them to read, and then they'd turn it over. So sometime we had to start giving it to them on the wrong side, so they would turn it to read it on the right side.
So finally I says, I can just tell them why I'm there. So, which I did, and to me, it was a little easier.
Some people were a little short on funds, and so we would offer to trade. So many times out in the country, they would trade you for maybe a dozen eggs for 3 or 4 booklets or something like that. Or if it was a book, you might end up with a chicken or 2. So when you went out in field service in the country, you had to be prepared to pick up many different things. Usually probably bagged the chicken up so he was in a bag back in the trunk. Got a little warm for the poor thing, but they survived it. And bring him home. And then after we got the chicken out and let him recover, why, we'd have a nice chicken dinner. So back in those days, we ate a lot of chicken.
In addition, placards and information marches had also come on the scene.
And Brother Rutherford, of course, was a shorthand expert. And whenever you talked to him, he'd always be busy writing. You wouldn't know what he'd be writing about. And so he's doing that this day. And so he ripped it off and he gave it to me. He said, what do you think of it? And it said, religion's a snare and a racket. So I said, that's pretty strong. As a matter of fact, I said, that's hot. Well, he said, that's what I meant it to be. So now he said, don't you think it'd be a good idea? Now, we're going to have a big information march 2 days from now. Couldn't Brother Clay in the printing make up some signs, religion's a snare and a racket, and put them on poles, and we'll have them for the parade. And Brother Noah was also in London at that time, so he and I led this parade. This parade was 6 miles long. 1,000 brothers showed up for the parade. It really was a spectacle. Every second sign would be religion is a snare and a racket. And the bobbies, the police, gave us protection as we went down Piccadilly Circus, Oxford Street, right in the center of London.
We'd put on these sandwich signs, that had some kind of a message and slogans on it. And they'd give us a little sign that we carried, on a stick.
We had it, religion is a snare and a racket. Then you had to put on the other side. They said, boy, that's pretty strong. Then on the other side, there's serve God and Christ the King.
And we walked very slowly down the street and then back the other way in an area.
And we would approach people with a handbill, and everybody took them, and they were looking at the placard.
They would try to not let you think they were looking at you, but they were reading all of the information on the placard.
Some people would say something to the effect that you're doing a good work, and that was always a blessing to me.
And I always remember the sister who looked up at the sign that she was carrying. She looked back up over her head, and it said, serve God and Christ the King, and she looked at the one in front of her, and the back of that sign said, religion is a snare and a racket. She said, well, I'm sure glad I don't have to carry that sign. Well, she was carrying that sign. It was on the back of hers. But anyway, she didn't know it, so she was happy.
They had adult-sized placards and they had little fellow placards. Well, I was only about 4 feet tall, but whenever I got there, the little ones were gone. So I only got a big one. It came underneath here, and every time I took a step, I kicked it with my feet, but it didn't make any difference. We enjoyed working with placards.
Nobody ever trained me in the ministry. So one day I was at the meeting, and the brother passed out the publisher's cards, and I said, where's mine? He said, well, you don't get one. You're not a publisher. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, you got to go preaching. I said, how do you do that? He said, well, come on Saturday and go over there and get magazines. And then I went out, and they pointed me at a door. I was scared, but I just went anyway. I didn't care.
My first experience in field service was really cute. I knocked on the door, and they said, hello, I've got something for you. And you can have it for a penny, or you can have it free if you promise to read it. I placed one at every door.
One morning, I was taking a group out in the field ministry, and a Navy man shows up at the Kingdom Hall. He's got his uniform on, and I didn't know what to do, so I took him door to door with me, and it was really very interesting. I thought it was pretty neat, me going to door with the guy in the military standing next to me, and I'm giving my presentations, and he's got a Bible, and we're following along with me. Of course, later on, I learned really it's not the most appropriate thing to take someone in military uniform out in the ministry with you, but at that time, I did it.
So my father in December said, well, he's going to go out in service, so I got ready and went with him. Now, neither one of us has ever been out in service before. The presiding overseer handed my father a territory and sent it to us out together. My father said, you take that side and I'll take this side. And that's what it was like. And, of course, I was no more prepared than the man in the moon.
We had pioneers come to our house, and they studied with us. And she decided to get us started in the ministry, we would begin with street work. But I said, no. I said, I don't want to do that. And she said, well, that's too bad, she said, because I can see the book of life now. There's the names of your sisters written there. Nola Rain.
As I got older, there was a pioneer brother in the congregation that asked if I'd like to go with him to work with him. He carried a rifle in the back of his car, which I thought was kind of unusual. We'd see a rabbit, he'd stop the car and shoot the rabbit and put it in the car. As it got toward the end of the day, I would ask him, did they know of any place where we could stay overnight? Because we were out in the ministry, and the people, in two different instances I recall, they said, well, you can stay with us. Or one of them said, well, we don't have enough food for supper. And the brother said, well, I have a couple of rabbits here if you want to skin them, and we can. So they did that. I don't think that this would work nowadays, and carrying a rifle in the car certainly is not advised.
It gradually became clear that the individual minister needed further cultivation. So the brothers started perhaps the only school from which not one single solitary person has ever graduated, the Theocratic Ministry School.
I recall the time I gave my first 6-minute talk. I was not confident in myself, so I wrote it down. But when I got up to give it, audience fear gripped me, and I stuttered and muttered, losing my thoughts. Then I resorted to reading from the manuscript, but my hands were trembling so much that the lines were jumping up and down. George Ganges.
Well, I remember when the ministry school started, and I remember the brother that gave the first talk, and he was so nervous he was kicking the podium all the time. Boom, boom, boom. I didn't know he was doing it.
And I was sure as my heart could be heard for the first 4 rows because it was beating so hard.
Back then, the sisters didn't give talks. The brothers gave the talks. The sisters didn't. We just laughed and giggled at the brothers.
I know we were all very, very excited as sisters when we were invited to be part of the school.
And I remember I was just so excited. I jumped up and was clapping. The sisters behind me were crying, I have to give talks now. They didn't like it. But I couldn't figure out why they were crying. But
well, we were in West Virginia in a little tiny congregation. And guess who was to give the first talk? It was me, of course. So I was scared to death. But we did it. I think everybody was quite nervous and apprehensive in the very beginning.
So it's really quite a marvelous training program. It's besides just not just public speaking, it's training in life.
This school would prove invaluable in training God's people to use their gift of speech in proclaiming the kingdom good news. But at the same time, another school was also having a powerful effect on the ministry, the Watchtower Bible College of Gilead.
That was 5.5 months of some of the happiest in my life.
It seemed like everybody else was a mental theocratic giant, so we were intimidated. I guess I should speak for myself mainly. I felt intimidated there, and I thought that everybody else probably knew a lot more than I did.
Classes were a delight. Our instructors were Brother Schroeder, Brother Maxwell Friend, Jack Redford, and Bob Porter.
Well, I'll tell you a story from Brother Friend. After I gave one of my talks in Gilead, he said to me, "Sister Brooks, I admire your grandchildren." He said, "You will be able to tell them such wonderful bedtime stories."
He said, "Brothers, Hebrews 4:12 says God's word is alive." He said, "Don't kill it by the way you read it."
I think one thing was the little white house in the kingdom in our preaching classes with Brother Redford. I'm telling you, that little white house, it had a doorbell and a door, and you would get sent out, and the class would decide what objection you were going to get. You come back in, I'm telling you, to push that doorbell, not knowing what was going to happen behind that door, and to see how you handled it. It was real formation, believe me.
It prepared us really for the ministry and what was ahead of us.
It was wonderful training for the ministry. I loved it.
The next several decades would see more new schools and training programs. But it would also witness monumental conventions and groundbreaking new releases. More tools to help God's people stay focused on the harvest.
1950, I don't think there's ever been a convention that had that kind of almost electricity in the air.
Everybody is excited. They're looking forward to the public talk and the releases. Everybody wants to get the new publications.
It was 8 days at that convention. Not sure that people could endure that much these days.
Well, I was so happy that we're having the convention because the people used to think we were just some little dinky religion, you know. And I knew when the Yankee Stadium was going to straighten them out.
But when that New World Translation in the Greek Scriptures was released, it really brought the house down.
Everybody expressed themselves, and they clapped, and there was cheering and clapping, and everybody needed to sit until after the session before they got their new books.
To have the New World Translation, even though it was the Green Bible, was just such a wonderful tool for us in the ministry.
It was exciting then, just like it is now, every time you get something new. And, of course, you appreciate it more as you use it.
Another thing I loved about those conventions, we had a live orchestra. And singing with a live orchestra was already exciting. But boy, when you would sit in those stadiums and see all your brothers and sisters, it just was so heartwarming and made me feel safe inside Jehovah's organization.
And it was just wonderful. Every time you went to the convention, it was something thrilling.
And when it ended, we didn't want it to end.
This period of expanded activity would result in publishers, pioneers, Bible studies, return visits, placements, and all aspects of the ministry reaching record highs. The work was growing in more countries than ever. But most importantly, the good news of the kingdom was being preached. But as has often been the case, there was much more to come. Just think of some of the events that you have witnessed in recent decades. The Pioneer Service School, the Ministerial Training School, the School for Kingdom Evangelizers, Special Metropolitan Public Witnessing, a newly designed JW.org, Caleb, and the Become Jehovah's Friend series, the Revised New World Translation. and now a new language app to further train publishers to learn to speak the pure language in multiple languages. Video on demand, an entirely new website where people can watch morning worship and other video publications. And finally, a return to broadcasting. Our own TV station, JW Broadcasting, taking the Bible's message from world headquarters to the farthest reaches of the planet. Imagine what we will look back on at the 1,000th or 1,000,000th anniversary of Kingdom Rule. The past 100 years helps us to appreciate that God's kingdom is real and that Jehovah God has been using that kingdom to accomplish His will on earth today. But how real is that kingdom to you? Looking back on our heritage and speaking to those with years of experience will make the kingdom more real to you and will prepare you to benefit from that kingdom.
The governing body have been anxious to give whatever they can for the upbuilding of the brothers and teaching them to walk the upright road.
Oh, I think the Revised New World Translation is a marvel.
The word love isn't big enough to say how much I love that Bible.
JW is fantastic. I'm in my iPad all the time. And then using videos, I'm in love with Caleb.
He's keeping abreast with what we need to be efficient ministers and to fulfill our responsibilities.
Everything that the society has done has been for our good. We're growing faster today than we ever have.
Jehovah really moving the chariot, and we're trying to keep up with it.
And been very grateful for having Jesus Brothers to take the lead for us.
There is no question about the kingdom being in control.
What else can be more real than the kingdom and the hope it holds?
I just feel privileged to have some share in inviting others to join us as servants of Jehovah God.
If the sun comes up, we know that the kingdom is going to accomplish just what the Bible says that it is.
This is the reality, God's kingdom. Everything else is an illusion.
The kingdom is in control. We only have good things to look forward to.